Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello, welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics need counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko. Alongside me, as always, my good friend, Dr. Issues.
Hello, everybody.
So this week's issue, number 8, the big one, the big grand Infinity War special blowout, grandiose, spectacular extravaganza. Dare I say would this be considered an annual then? Like if we're doing this one, this is sort of like an annual, like the comics, you have the annual episode that's always like 46 pages and there's like, way fewer ads and stuff like that. And it's like $1 more, but you get way much more content. That's what this one is about, because this one we are going all out. The Mad Titan himself, Thanos. Looking forward to doing this one. Doc?
Well, I'm glad that you decided to let me be on this episode because I made so many Titanic jokes leading up to this. You could consider this my penance. I'm going to treat this with the reverence that it deserves.
I was actually warned by one of our listeners, my mother in particular. She said, you need to curb it with the violence. You can't keep threatening him like that. I said, why? He deserved it. Before we begin, as always, you can find us, check out our website, capesonthecouch.live. We have a Twitter account, Capes on the Couch. We have a Facebook page, our email address, capesonthecouch@gmail.com, which some of you have utilized. And we'll get to that towards the end of the episode. We do certainly appreciate hearing from our listeners. You can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, and YouTube. So any one of those myriad formats, whatever works for you best. If that's how you choose to listen to us, we appreciate any and all of our listeners and the feedback. So like I said, just as we continue to grow, we hope that you continue to grow with us and learn and listen and get back to us and tell us what you like, what you don't like. If there's a character suggestion that you have, please, by all means, reach out to us. We certainly have a long list of characters to choose from, but we also know it is not completely exhaustive. One of our listeners recommended X from Dark Horse Comics, which I had never heard of. I mean, I fully admit I'm sort of fallen, I guess, victim to the big two mindset. I know DC and Mar-Vell and like a handful of indie characters, but X was not one of them. But we'll definitely take X into consideration. So. And like I said, if there's another character that you want us to do, please let us know. We've got time and we certainly don't mind reading comics for research purposes. My wife is like, oh, what are you doing? I'm reading. Oh, is that for the podcast? Yes, it is. So please don't disturb me.
Oh, I can't believe our audience is making us do all this work. We're going to have to read comic books.
Damn them. Yeah, I've spent this past week rereading the Infinity Saga and all of the various comics associated with that. And it was just, God, there's just so many better things I could be doing with my time. I'm sorry, I couldn't even say that with a straight face. That's one of the awesome things about this podcast is just getting to read these comics and re-experience them, even if, we've read them before, just revisiting these stories that are told and these modern myths that we get to discuss and dissect in depth on a weekly basis it's a privilege, at least speaking for me. And I think I could speak for you, Doc, that it's a privilege to be able to talk about these things week in and week out.
It allows me to view the things that I read I was going to say as a child, but as a teenager and as an adult, just to give them more meaning in my life. And that's something that we don't get to do with everything that we enjoy. Sometimes we just consider it, quote unquote, mindless. But at this point, I think everyone realizes that it's incredibly mindful. And, it allows us to enjoy it on a different level.
Yeah. There is something to be said for the mindless stuff. But if you can find a deeper meaning in something. I think it creates just that emotional resonance with you. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about comic books. It's a testament to the creators that they have created these characters and given us these stories that have resonated with audiences for decades, literally decades, to see that transported from one medium to another. And again, I know we say that we focus on the comics in this show, but we would certainly be remiss to not mention the live action translation that many of these superheroes have undergone in the past, say, 20 odd years, and the way that they speak to audiences who don't just read the comics, but who go to the movies or watch the TV shows. You know, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry at this point, and superheroes are very much at the forefront of that sort of, I guess, reinvigoration of the cinematic experience. And nowhere is that more evident than with what Mar-Vell has been able to do. And again, just as a side note, it is unbelievable that they have been able to take 10 years and 18 films and create this cohesive story, and everything is connected in some fashion. It's just, the mind reels to think that they were able to do this, and to think that they did this out of necessity, because they didn't have Spider-Man back when they started this. They didn't have Spider-Man. They didn't have the X-Men, the Fantastic Four. There were a number of characters that were not in-house. And they said, well, who do we have? Well, we've got the Avengers, so let's work with that. And as a result, now this week, by the time this episode comes out, it will be, this Friday, Avengers Infinity War, the beginning of the end of this multi-phase, multi-film saga. And at the center of all of this is one of the greatest antagonists in the history of comics, in the history of entertainment, the Mad Titan Thanos. And the superfluousness of the introduction is insufficient to adequately describe the impact that a character like Thanos has on the stories. It's just fascinating.
I'm going to give a bit of a warning to the people listening to this. This is going to be one of those episodes where we're going to have a lot of fun with it, but also things are going to get a little deep. It's going to be one of those things where either you're going to feel like you're on another plane of existence, or you're just going to have to tune out here and there and tune back in. Obviously, as podcasters, we don't want you to tune completely out, but just to let you know, this is going to be kind of wide ranging. And, I really hope that people enjoy it, because although I am going to talk about, the bread and butter of what I do, it's also going to expand my horizons to things that I've never talked about before. So buckle your seatbelts, please, enjoy the ride.
We're going to be in for a hell of a ride. So Thanos was created by Jim Starlin, a writer/artist of incredible renown who deserves all of the accolades given to him, because his career continues to be inventive and fascinating, and he's constantly coming up with stories. But the thing about Thanos is Thanos was created in 1973, and he was an Iron Man villain. That's where he got started. Everybody, I don't know how many people are aware that a villain, a character as powerful and as impactful as Thanos, started off just as, it was almost like a one-shot story. It was Thanos, and Drax the Destroyer was also created in that very same story. Drax was created, again, in the comics. I know people have a very different understanding of who Drax is due to the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, but Drax was created literally by cosmic beings to battle Thanos. And Thanos came and was trying to conquer the galaxy, and Drax was sent out to destroy him. I read the issue not that long ago in preparation for this, but in the process of reading so many Thanos comics, I forget the specifics of it, but Iron Man ultimately ends up getting drawn into this intergalactic battle where he has to defeat Thanos. And I don't want to say that he beats Thanos, because it's a situation where Thanos gets away. If I'm not mistaken, they defeat a robot who was posing as Thanos, or Thanos put in his stead. The real Thanos got away, and they ended up fighting and destroying a robot. He later tussled with a number of the Avengers in later stories. Again, almost all of them written by Jim Starlin, who was working on the Captain Mar-Vell book. And by the way, this is Mar-Vell, the Kree soldier, not Carol Danvers. You know, she was at the time, I think, just Ms. Marvel back in the 70s. So he was an adversary of Captain Mar-Vell. And then he began battling Adam Warlock, a.k.a. him. In the late 70s is where we see him battle the Avengers on a number of occasions. And again, it's a situation where they all band together and they fight him. They defeat him, but he always ends up escaping or somehow eluding their grasp. And we start to see more and more of the true nature of his power and just how strong he really is. He ends up being killed by Adam Warlock. Will turn to granite, I guess is the correct term, is a statue basically of Thanos. And then he gets resurrected by Mistress Death. And this is a character that we are going to see largely interplay and intertwined with Thanos over the coming decades and over the coming stories. At least from my perspective, when she has a human face and not just a skull face, she's kind of hot.
I'm not going to comment on that because I want to continue to have a co-host. Don't worry, buddy. We'll get you the help you need.
I'm saying it's a compliment.
I realize it's a compliment. It's also pretty twisted. What I was going to say before this was the fact that there's a personification of death. In addition to, honestly, if you look at the Marvel Universe, there are several major factors of existence that have their own personifications and their own powers. It's something that they've done for quite a while. The thing is, all of these characters end up making things interesting. I was going to say messing things up, but they don't always mess things up. And somehow Thanos is usually heavily intertwined with all of their machinations. You know what the equivalent, I think, is? And don't get me wrong, I know Marvel has a hand in this too, but it reminds me of learning about ancient civilizations and how they viewed spirituality in the form of multiple gods, but they all had their own personalities and their own pettiness. We'll get to that later. But yeah, I think the fact that Thanos has this bond with, you know, the personification of death is absolutely wonderful.
And it's not just this interaction, it's an obsession, and we'll get to that later on. So in the early 90s is when we start to see the beginning of, or I guess setting the stage for what would become known as the Infinity Saga. And it starts off in the Thanos Quest, which is 2 issues. Thanos is on the search for the Soul Gems, not the Infinity Gems. The Soul Gems, because that's what they're originally known as. Everybody knows them as the Infinity Stones, because that's what they're called in the movies. In the comics, they were called the Infinity Gems. But before that, in the beginning, when they first were created by Starlin, and I think they first appeared in The Power of Warlock, because they were heavily associated with Adam Warlock and his crew. They were the Soul Gems, even though only one of them technically had power over the soul. So you have the soul gem, the mind gem, space, power, time, and reality. Those are the 6 key gems that Thanos needs in order to control all the various facets of the universe. And he goes to each of the holders of these gems and kills them or otherwise relieves them of the gem. And so now he's got all 6. And he puts them in this giant glove, and now that becomes the Infinity Gauntlet. And that is the title and the setting of the first part of the Infinity Saga in the comics. And we've seen in the MCU, Thanos, he has the gauntlet. By the way, I love that little bit in Thor Ragnarok, spoiler alert for, you know, a film that's like 6 months old at this point, where Hela's going through Odin's treasure vault and sees the giant Infinity Gauntlet. Oh, that's fake. And just knocks it off, because we'd seen the Infinity Gauntlet in the first Thor movie. I think at the time they put it there, it wasn't really known that they were going to be going this route or that they were going to be able to get there. So they're like, oh, we're just going to throw the Infinity Gauntlet in the background in Odin's vault, like a visual Easter egg for the fans. Except now they've reached the point where, oh, snap, we actually need the real Infinity Gauntlet. So Taika Waititi just said, I'll just have Hela Said's fight. Apologize for my poor Kiwi accent there. But
you were using an accent there? I didn't even catch it. Sorry.
The Infinity Gauntlet. This is the big one. This is the event to end all events, or at least it was supposed to be until, of course, the sequels and everything just got escalated. So Thanos now has ultimate power over all facets of reality. He's got everything. He can do whatever he wants. And what does he want? He wants to impress Death. He has the hots for Mistress Death so much that he is willing to eliminate half of all sentient life in the universe just to impress her, because he wants to win her love. He wants her respect. He wants to be seen as an equal. The petulance that he displays in the Infinity Gauntlet storyline is incredibly entertaining, because he is like a love-struck teenager whose crush won't pay him any mind. And the lengths to which he goes to get her to pay attention to him, like I said, is incredibly destructive. He wipes out half of all sentient life in the universe, literally with a snap of his fingers. All of a sudden, people are gone. They're just not there. And it just gets worse from there. That's not even the worst part of it. The more he does, the less Lady Death cares about him, and the angrier he gets. It's just incredibly amusing, at least for me, to read him just pissing and moaning about how Lady Death won't pay him any mind. She won't speak to him. She's got a spokesman who's constantly like, Lady Death isn't amused. This isn't enough. This is not for her. And then he gets the gems, and then he turns around and goes, well, now you're Lady Death's superior. Why would she disrespect you by addressing you directly? And that sets him off. That just absolutely pisses him off. Doc, you want to chime in here?
There's just something about the idea that someone has the ultimate success and it still means nothing. I am pretty sure that every being in existence would have a huge problem with that, because it invalidates everything that you've done in your life. I'm not sure that even someone as experienced as Thanos would come up with something rational to occupy their time. So unfortunately, the only thing to do is, go big or go home.
Oh, he goes big.
Exactly.
He definitely goes big. And on a side note, I love that Mephisto is his little lackey. You basically have the personification of the devil in the Mar-Vell universe kissing up to Thanos in a way that is just, again, for me, very entertaining. He's almost like, and you're going to laugh at this, he's LeFou to Thanos's Gaston. That's the way that I envision Mephisto in this role. He is, you're so great, Thanos. You're so amazing and you're so wonderful. And I don't understand why it is that Lady Death just isn't obsessed with you. You should try this. You should do that. That's how you'll win her heart. It's Beauty and the Beast with Thanos is Gaston, Lady Death is Belle, and Mephisto is LeFou.
You realize the fan art that you just inspired, right?
I'm certain that I am not the first one to think of it. And I'm pretty sure Rule 34 guarantees that not only is it out there, it's also very much not safe for work.
Yeah, you went there.
I did go there.
I thought it, and you said it.
Pretty sure that's the theme of this show, is you think it, and then I say it. Because if it's wrong, I'm going to put it out there. For those of you who don't know, by the way, Rule 34 states that if something exists, there's porn of it. That's one of the rules of the internet. It's Rule 34. Listen, I didn't make it up, okay? I didn't create the rules of the internet. I just know what they are. It is my job and my responsibility to inform our listening audience of these sorts of things. I would be remiss in my duty if I didn't tell people what it is.
I am so glad we didn't just go for a straight family rating. My goodness.
I'm not saying anything necessarily explicit.
No, of course not. Of course not. Keeping this on the rails.
Trying to, sorry. So anyway... Thanos acquires the Infinity. Yeah, let's get back to the story. I apologize. It just the metaphor literally just came to me, and I felt beholden to express it. Thanos acquires the Infinity Gems, snaps his fingers, eliminates half of sentient life from the universe. Now, whoever's left has to battle him. They do so not really in a convincing fashion, and the Avengers show up, or whoever is left of the Avengers. They fall. Doctor Strange and Silver Surfer fall. Adam Warlock is unsuccessful. Then you get the aforementioned cosmic beings, the literal embodiments of the various natures and facets of reality itself. You have eternity, infinity, Kronos, the god of time, the living tribunal, all of these cosmic beings, celestials, all show up. All of them fall to the mighty Thanos. The only thing that does him in is his own hubris, because he eventually assumes his godhood and transcends to a higher plane of reality. In so doing, he leaves his body, and Nebula, at this point, who in the comics is his granddaughter, not his daughter as is portrayed in the MCU, she is existing basically as a husk of a person, because he's been toying with her by keeping her sort of in the limbo between life and death. But she has enough wherewithal to walk up to his body and pull the gauntlet off, to which point now he returns back to his normal power. Now Nebula has the gauntlet, and now things really go sideways, because now Thanos has to sort of, I don't want to say he doesn't, because he certainly doesn't align with everybody else, but he's like, she's really messed up. I was prepared for godhood. She's not. That's sort of like the big twist of the storyline, if you will, is that the ultimate big bad, so to speak, isn't really Thanos, or at least the climactic battle isn't against Thanos. It's against Nebula, who now has the powers of godhood and wants to use them to not only torture Thanos for everything that he put her through, but also just reshape the universe in the way that she wants to. So ultimately, Nebula is defeated. The Infinity Gems are separated. No, I'm sorry. No, they're not separated. I forgot. Adam Warlock ends up with the gauntlet.
Okay. Since you were allowed to do metaphors, I'm going to do it too. Older generations may appreciate this. Younger generations are in a much more safe space environment. So if anyone's ever played the game Kill the Guy with the Football, that's pretty much what this reminded me of. At the first start, okay, Thanos trying to get all of this power, putting together all of these stones, with the gauntlet and all of that. Yeah, we get that. Okay, fine. So he ends up having that. But then from there, it's like, okay, so once that's assembled, especially once you get Nebula involved, it basically becomes more of an issue of, all right, hot potato, who's got it? Who's got it? Make sure you get it. Oh my God, don't let that person get it. Oh, what's going on? And it's chaos. Every step of the way, it becomes an issue of not just who's going to have the power, but, oh my goodness, what on earth are they going to do with this thing? And when Adam Warlock gets it, it becomes this kind of a Cold War where it's like, yay, I guess? Like, okay, he's not Thanos, but he's got issues of his own, and is this really the person that we want to have this thing? But things didn't go all to hell immediately, so it's okay. And then the Living Tribunal basically steps in for everyone and says, nope, not a good idea.
Yeah, so Infinity Gauntlet ends, oddly enough, with Thanos living as a farmer. He basically says, I'm out. I had godhood. It was insufficient for my needs. So since it was taken away from me, I'm just going to live here and farm. I'm just really going to bring it back to the basics. So Adam Warlock, as you said, ends up with the Infinity Gauntlet and all 6 of the gems. And then he eliminates his good and evil sides. He expels them from his body so that he can become a being of pure logic. The Living Tribunal decrees that the Infinity Gems shall not be allowed to be used in unison ever again. And so then a year later, a year after Infinity Gauntlet, is where we get Infinity War. Now, I'm certain, based on the promotional materials from the movie, that they are not going the route of this story in the movie, because before you have Infinity War, you have to get Infinity Gauntlet. So the movie is really going to be closer to Infinity Gauntlet in story, but they're going to call it Infinity War. In which case now Magus, or Magus, I don't know how you would pronounce it. Magus, Magus.
Yeah, I've always thought Magus, but I've
Magus.
Never had...
Okay, let's go with Magus just for consistency's sake. Magus, the expelled evil side of Adam Warlock, who he had previously battled and was defeated, comes back. Now he wants the gauntlet and the gems, and he has allied himself with a doppelganger of Thanos. So now the real Thanos goes to Adam Warlock and the Infinity Watch, as they are known, and says, listen, something way worse than me is coming. I'm willing to help you. We need to stop this. And of course, nobody trusts Thanos as far as they can spit, but they ally with him. Magus ends up with the Infinity Gauntlet for a spell. And then he battles Adam Warlock and they merge. It's never fully explained exactly how it's resolved. Meanwhile, Thanos fights his doppelganger and defeats his doppelganger. And it is sort of revealed that Thanos has greater schemes for the gauntlet, but is willing to play the role of good guy, I guess, so that he can earn some trust so that he can later usurp that trust. I found Infinity War not as good of a story as Gauntlet. I thought it was a little headier, still entertaining, mind you, of course, but not quite as good as Infinity Gauntlet. Then you move to Infinity Crusade.
Okay, people, this is the part where I warned you. If you need to just kind of mentally go to your own safe zone and relax a little bit, if you do yoga, if you meditate, whatever it is, this would be the time to do it because this gets a bit out there.
Well, I'm not going to belabor the point too much. Suffice to say that when Adam Warlock expelled his good and bad sides, we had previously experienced Magus as the bad side. Now we have the goddess, and she's the good side. She goes, oh, I want to defeat evil in the universe. So I'm going to pull all the characters who are really, really moral or religious and use them to help me create this paradise so that we can, promote good and fight evil in the universe, which sounds like a really good theory until she realizes that, you know what creates evil? Sentient beings. So I'm just going to get rid of all sentient life in the universe. This is another situation where, again, Thanos has to ally with Adam Warlock to help Warlock beat part of his personality. And at this point, I mean, there was some philosophical quotes that were thrown into Infinity War, but it was mostly just as like, okay, this is like a little bit of a concept that we're going to discuss. And at one point, Magus talks about Nietzsche. Infinity Crusade, you need to like study philosophy 101 at a minimum to understand some of the concepts that are discussed here. And I just found it to be way too cerebral for my liking. And again, Thanos doesn't play a huge role in this. It's mostly about the goddess, but he's kind of in there a little bit.
I want everyone to think about what Anthony just said, because if you listen to any of our episodes, we like to think of ourselves as fairly intelligent people. So for it to go over our heads, think about how much effort that took. My goodness. And mind you, I remember reading this the first time through, and I'd say maybe two comics in, I said to myself, do I want to continue with this? And the completionist in me said yes, and I did read the whole thing, but afterwards I basically made a promise to myself that I might talk about it in the future, but I didn't think I was going to read through the whole thing again. If anybody has some disagreements about that, please let us know. But from what I've read in terms of reviews, I think many people felt the same way.
Yeah. And again, back to the completionist thing, like as a Moon Knight fan, I am trying to get all of the issues that he's ever appeared in. And Infinity Crusade, oddly enough, is the only one out of the 3 Infinity Saga stories that I don't have all 6 issues in. But I do need it because Moon Knight is selected as one of the highly religious beings because of A, his Jewish background, and B, his experience with Khonshu, the Egyptian god. So moving forward past Infinity Crusade, then you have into the early 2000s, you have Infinity Abyss, where Thanos creates 5 clones of himself, and they're sort of experimentations. It's like partial clone, and then we're going to give them some additional powers, like Professor Xavier had one, and there were a couple of other ones. They attack him, and then he's once again forced to rely on the help of heroes to destroy them. Then you move into Annihilation, which is another cosmic storyline. And this was an Abnett and Lanning deal where DNA, this is where the Guardians of the Galaxy as we know them was spun out of the Annihilation event. And the War of Kings, I believe it was called as well. Some really, really cool cosmic stuff. So Thanos allies with Annihilus until he realizes that Annihilus wants to destroy the entire universe. And then he helps Galactus, and then Drax kills Thanos.
Okay, pump the brakes. Something called Annihilus wanted to annihilate. I'm sorry. Someone as intelligent as Thanos should have seen that coming.
You would think. But again, Thanos is very much the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I think that tends to be a large portion of his strategic thinking. And to the extent that Annihilus was willing to help him achieve the ends, he didn't really care what the means were. So then moving forward into the Thanos imperative. So now he's the new avatar of death. And he fights the Guardians of the Galaxy. He ends up imprisoned within the Cancerverse by Richard Rider, Nova. And then moving forward, then we have the Thanos Rising 5-part miniseries, which I read and I was entertained by, but I feel it was one of those situations where villains lose a little bit of their mystique when you learn their backstory and when you find out that they had a rough childhood or whatever the case may be. Darth Vader was this ultimate badass, and then we see Hayden Christensen crying and complaining about sand, and you go, oh, so he's just kind of a pansy then. Maleficent was really, really cool. And then Angelina Jolie turned her into this, mother figure for Aurora. And it was just, but why? Why couldn't she just be a badass witch who just turns into a dragon? Like, why do we need to know the backstory to every single villain? Why can't they just be a villain? Why? I think that's what made the Joker in The Dark Knight so compelling. We didn't get a backstory.
No one could see what I was doing just now with my hand, but basically I'm indicating that money is what's behind all of this.
Oh, I know that. I'm not naive. I understand it's money and that, this has, this great IP attached to it. Let's create a prequel so that we can explain where this comes from. But like I said, I think it just demystifies the character. So Thanos is born on Titan. His mother, Suisan, I guess is how you would pronounce it. She tries to kill him at birth because, that's a good thing because he's born with the deviant gene and he doesn't look like the other Titans. It doesn't look like his brother Eros, a.k.a. Star Fox, or his father Mentor or anybody. He's just, he's the purple prune chin freak that we all come to know and hate. So he discovers at a very young age that he's obsessed with death and he's hanging out with this little girl and she's ends up convincing him to kill his mother, and that's when she reveals that she is death, and that's where his obsession, love, whatever of death comes from, and that she says, "Oh, if you really want me to like you, you're gonna have to kill a lot more people."
Doesn't this sound like all those crushes? I know you mentioned it before, but I mean, you're on the playground, and this girl realizes that you like her and basically says, well, you need to prove yourself, all that. Thanos is one of those people that actually did it. Like, not just did it, but did it well. Did it to excess. Did it constantly. Did it for the rest of his life. Did it so overwhelmingly that it couldn't be denied and it still didn't work? Doggone it.
Yeah, whatever happened to pulling hair or teasing or something like that, or just writing, a note. Do you like me? Circle, yes or no, circle 1. No. He has to go out and kill repeatedly. So Thanos Rising leads into Infinity. And this is where we discover he has a son and his son is half inhuman. And he decides to go all Old Testament God, Metallica creeping death, kill all inhuman boys between 16 and 22. This is like cosmic Marvel version of Passover.
You just blew my mind with that. Okay.
I mean, we're going for metaphors here in this episode, clearly, so we might as well just keep the ball rolling. I mean, that's essentially what it is. He orders the death of all inhuman boys between 16 and 22 because one of them could be his son. And he doesn't kill his son, Thane. Really? That's the name you go with? Thane?
Hey, that's no different than anybody else that names their child Junior. You just tweak it a little bit. That's all. And in this case, it was like, you're going through a needle in a haystack, you burn the haystack.
I guess. So in Secret Wars, he's killed by God Emperor Doom, because at this point, Dr. Doom has control over everything, and Thanos does not have the Infinity Gauntlet. So Doom just sort of wipes him from existence. Civil War II rolls around. Now he's resurrected by Galactus. He battles the Avengers. He gets captured again. Now he discovers he's dying.
Hey, that's a great thing, right? He'd be closer to death, right?
That's what he wants.
Yeah, except he doesn't. Huh?
No, he's trying to find a cure. He goes to his father, Mentor. He wants Mentor's help. Mentor doesn't help him, can't provide a cure, so he kills his father. And then he allies with Hela, who tells him that she can give him the one thing that he really wants, and that's death. And then they kiss. So now he has a crush on Hela because she can kill him, even though he's died before.
Let's just be real, people. Thanos wanted a threesome.
I have nothing in response to that.
You've noticed that that's happened quite a few times across the table with both of us, right?
Yeah.
That's right, folks. We are getting so deep into these topics that we are really creating some cognitive dissonance amongst the two of us. So I have no idea what it's doing to you out there.
Yeah, I can only imagine what our listeners are going through right now. So I think that's been a certainly the most comprehensive background we've done on any of the characters. But now let's delve into the issues. And the very, very first thing that comes to mind, and we've brought it up a number of occasions, is his obsession with death. I mean, I know people who joke that they're obsessed with death. None of them hold a candle to Thanos. This is not just some metaphorical, conceptual discussion where, I think death is fascinating and yada, yada, yada. No, he's got the hots for death, who's a lady in the comics. And again, sometimes drawn as a very attractive female, but he's got the hots for her and he wants to impress her and goes about it in the most horrific ways possible. As I said earlier, he is the most misguided, love-struck fool ever. Doc, what does this say about him that all this is out of love? These are displays of affection.
Well, I could go with just the general definitions. That almost classifies as necrophilia, but clearly, yeah. I mean, I don't have anything positive to say about that, but that tells me that he lacks any other meaning in life. I mean, there's something to be said about being singular or focus. But the idea is have some enjoyment, have some fun along the way when you're trying to reach your goals. With something like this, with death, it's more like everything else is unenjoyable. And in a way, it makes his task even easier because he doesn't have to value any of it along the way until he reaches that point where death has fully embraced him and accepted him and had sex with him. I'm sorry, people. That's really what we're talking about here.
That's his goal.
Yeah. Then, there's nothing else to shoot for. But Thanos has this unique combination where he has the type of abilities where, unlike the rest of us, where we may get close to our goals and not quite succeed, or even if we succeeded in our goals, our obstacles were, something that we can look back on with some level of fondness. Thanos doesn't do that. He's totally willing to disregard all of it at all times just for that one possible goal. This basically leads to him acting in ways that no other being, I think, can comprehend. He obviously is willing to eliminate every other being. He's willing to, at times, inconsistently eliminate himself. And I don't mean that in terms of being suicidal. I mean just the practical nature of, well, if that's what she wants. It's not exactly something I think I can wrap my head around, but I'm doing my best here.
I don't think any of us can conceptualize it. I mean, I think to some extent we can certainly understand the notion of a crush that is unrequited. It's unrequited love. And that is a story as old as time. And it resonates with so many people because it's happened to all of us. We've all had crushes on someone who didn't want to give us the time of day. But part of growth and maturity is that we move beyond those things and we seek a relationship where it is an equal partnership. And at one point, Thanos says, I just want to be your equal. And that's when he acquires all 6 of the Infinity Gems, to which point Death's spokesman says, you're no longer her equal. Now you're her superior. And now she's not worthy to talk to you directly. So he succeeded far more than he thought he would. And in so doing, didn't accomplish his goal.
That's an excellent point. Wow. The idea that too much success can be seen as a failure? Wow, okay. I mean, we really are getting a bit over my head here.
No, but that's the case, is he wanted Death's affection. He felt that acquiring the Infinity Gems would allow him to do that. He did it. He killed half of sentient life in the universe. He built a literal shrine floating in space to her, and we never see her speak. We never hear her speak. What she ends up doing towards the end of Infinity Gauntlet is actually assist Silver Surfer and Doctor Strange. And in so doing, Doctor Strange goes, wow, she must really hate Thanos if she's willing to help us against him. So everything that he's doing is just further alienating her. He's that guy. He's that guy that's trying way too hard to impress a girl. And the more he does, the less she likes him. I feel bad for him because I've been in that situation. I have been the guy who really, really likes the girl and is like, wow, I have to do something. I have to do something big. I'll create this grand romantic gesture. I will do whatever it takes to ask this girl out and so on and so forth. And then I'm the one who ends up looking like the fool with egg on my face.
There's one major difference, I'll say, though. You still, and I know this for a fact, you still have people around you that would either point out, hey, this goal that you have, it seems a bit misguided, or, if, let's say, in theory, you were getting closer to your achievements, it was, okay, good for you. Is there anything else you'd like to work on? And if it was an unrequited love, it would be, wow, that sucks. What can we do either to cheer you up or what can we do to get you to move on? Because we are not going to let you stay in the same place doing the same thing for eternity. Thanos doesn't have that. He doesn't have that guidance. He doesn't have that support. He doesn't have someone that he views as a friend, as an unromantic, platonic equal, peer, whatever you want to call it. Even though power-wise, there are plenty of beings in the Marvel universe that would qualify, but that's not how he sees them. He sees them as tools. He sees them as people that either he can partner with to get his goals met, or as enemies that are standing in his way. In other words, can you see Thanos kind of grieving a bit about his latest failed attempt to get death in his favor and sitting down with a beer or whatever it is these cosmic beings would have? That's the equivalent, and just kind of drowning his sorrows a little bit with a pat on his back from, someone like Warlock saying, hey, man, don't worry about it. You'll get it next time.
No, absolutely not. And I think that's one of the things that drives Thanos as a character is his isolation. He's incredibly lonely. For a being with all that power, he's not alone, but he's lonely. And I know that's an expression that gets misused a lot and it's a trope, but it's the truth. He's never alone, but he's so lonely.
I think you hit the nail right on the head. And when we get to the next section, I have an idea on how we can address that. Yes, that's right. I'm actually doing a teaser within our own episode, just to give you a hint as to ultimately, I think, what's going to help this guy.
So one of his other issues tying in with that obsession with death is the petulance. He really, in many ways, particularly in the Infinity Gauntlet story, it's almost like he's throwing a temper tantrum at times because he's like, why won't she notice me? Why won't she talk to me? He destroys things. He breaks stuff, all in this temper tantrum like fit of she's not giving me the attention that I want. He's so attention craved and deprived. Again, that petulance, he's immature.
You hit the nail on the head again. He doesn't have anything, though, to react to. I mean, he has Lady Death, but he doesn't have a parent. I know he has parents. People don't send emails about that part. But my point is, he doesn't have an immediate person or entity that he can respond to that he has the respect of to kind of put it in perspective. He basically gets to have his tantrum throughout the toy store with no one to tell him that's wrong, or even just to react saying, like, oh my God, look at the damage you did. Because sometimes when children have those tantrums, they want the attention no matter what it is, positive or negative. Even just someone saying to them, wow, you wrecked that entire aisle. The kid actually gets a positive emotional response out of that. Thanos can't even get that. Usually because the things that he's destroying are the people or the superheroes or the other, celestial beings that would be able to give him that feedback. And now that you mentioned it, I'm just going back like years ago. Didn't he actually do that to one of the characters, like turn them into blocks and then just knock them over? Like, I'm pretty sure that happened.
I think he turned Thor into glass. He turned somebody into cubes. Yeah. During the Infinity Gauntlet story. Again, when he has control of the gems, he can do what he wants with reality, and he certainly did that. Well, to your parent point, I mean, he killed his mother at a young age. He killed his mother, and he never got along with his father. And I think part of that loneliness is because he was born with that deviant gene, and he didn't look like the other Titans. But, I mean, this is a situation where he's just the kid who was picked on, and then turns around and decides, well, I'm just going to go ahead and eliminate the people who make fun of me. He was the bullied. Now he's the ultimate bully with the ultimate power.
Yeah, that's a situation we don't see that commonly, or if we do, it has some sort of check on it. Yeah, usually some outside agency is able to regulate what's going on. If we're talking like on a national level or things like that, it's how wars get started. It's how conflicts happen. But to put it on the plane of existence as we know it, that's something that I think they handled in Infinity Gauntlet. I think they handled it well. Just the idea that, well, something's going to happen that is beyond anyone's expectations, including Thanos himself, and that's how we end up with change. I think the way it was handled, though, past that with Infinity War, Infinity Crusade, all that, I think it just went beyond anything I could have considered. But to tie it to something that people actually do fear in the future with technology, I mean, people fear the singularity, the idea that at some point we're going to have something that's so beyond ourselves because of what we've created, be it artificial intelligence, be it extraterrestrial beings that we encounter, or whatever the case may be, that they're not going to recognize us as something that's important. It's going to be no different than like squashing an ant because it moved too far from its colony. Like it's not that they're trying to purposely hurt us, but we're going to end up in a situation where we're not important. Thanos actually got to that point. He basically had all of the power, all the abilities, all, destroying everything. And it's like, well, okay, what's next? That's a situation that most people don't get to in life. When you do, it can be just as devastating as anything else anyone has experienced. Let's say you've been incredibly successful at something. You have a business that's worth billions of dollars. You're incredibly famous, whatever. No one questions your abilities anymore. No one challenges you. Because bullying is a terrible thing. It's not something that you look forward to, and it's not something that anyone should do to anyone else. I don't consider it a positive at all. But that doesn't mean that the person doesn't get some value from it ultimately because they learn to overcome the challenge. So congratulations. Golf clap. Thanos was able to overcome the bullying, but he didn't do it in a way that was going to put him in a positive situation. He did it and basically ended up worse off than when he started.
So the next thing that we can discuss with Thanos is his nihilism. And that is addressed particularly in Infinity Gauntlet, where he's the primary antagonist. This notion that I'm just going to do what I want and nothing else matters. You want to talk about that for a bit?
Well, I mean, I think it plays back to many of the things we already mentioned. Even without the gauntlet, without the gems, he is able to accomplish so much that the responses he gets are irrelevant. It's amazing that a person or a being could go through their existence and, other than that one other thing, other than Lady Death, not have any response to feedback. He's dismissive. He doesn't care what you think. He doesn't care how you react, as long as it's something that either furthers his goal or basically is an opportunity to get eliminated, then, you know, he'll deal with it for the time being, but it's a nuisance.
Fallout Boy, I don't care what you think as long as it's about me.
Uh-huh.
To your earlier point, I was going to say, you know, talking about the squashing of the ants, it reminded me of Loki's comment from the Avengers, you know, an ant has no quarrel with a boot. You're so far removed from the notion that anything has an impact. So what difference does it make? I'm going to do what I want.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, I think the way he's written, he actually, I will say this though, he will give random opportunities for other beings to create meaning. There are some instances with people that he's had enough encounters with. He gave it, the ultimate one, he gave it to Mar-Vell when he's basically going to die. Basically, I've battled you so many times. If I'm not going to have that opportunity again, then let's do it this one last time. And in his mind, I'm guessing here, but he basically says, you know what, maybe this will be worth something because it's finite. You know, the number of times we throw around infinity in this whole thing, you know, the idea that there was something of value to him, mainly because he had been defeated before.
Yeah, well, I think that battle, Thanos was dead if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
So Thanos is going to be the one to escort Mar-Vell to death in the incredibly moving Death of Captain Marvel graphic novel. He said basically, you know, I will help escort you to death because you are a great warrior. You are my greatest adversary. You have earned that right. So there is some small notion of honor, as warped as it is, with Thanos. It's just he doesn't give it freely. Certainly doesn't give it freely.
Right. It's rare. But it's there. So I guess that counts for something.
Thanos is primarily focused in greed and ego and lust for power. I mean, one of the classic cases of comics just showing you a character that wants everything for himself and does achieve it. He gets that power and he uses it. And he's phenomenally destructive with it. Ultimately, he loses, but there is a good long period of time that he is the victor. And you don't often see the bad guy winning in comics for any reasonable length of time. But he does end up with, you know, because don't forget, at the Infinity Gauntlet, when the Infinity Gauntlet starts, he's already gotten the gems.
Right.
The Thanos Quest is about him acquiring the gems.
That's right.
Infinity Gauntlet, he has them. Now he's using them.
Right. Very true. I'm going to take a little bit of a positive spin on this because, and I do believe this in general, sentient beings, because once again, I know I use humanity all the time, but sentient beings, for the most part, do not consider themselves to be villains. They do not consider themselves to be bad. So when you flip it around and use that, all we're talking about with Thanos is potential. You have natural talents and abilities that either you're born with or have developed early on in life. And what do you do with it? Thanos is trying to live out his potential. Okay, he's already had the situation where he's born to a race that has incredible powers, incredible abilities. Even though he's considered an outcast, that doesn't change underlying what he is capable of. The fact that he ends up with ambition basically means he's recognized that there is something that can be done with that talent. That's great. The fact that he put a plan into action, that he was able to list and label goals, that's great. I mean, I don't remember who coined this saying, but a goal without a plan is just a wish. It doesn't mean anything. Another variation on that. If everybody got what they wanted, then we'd all be billionaires with six-pack abs. I mean, you actually have to take further steps. You actually have to take action. You have to use your effort, your energy, all of those things. Thanos, to say that he did that is an understatement. He just went all out to accomplish what he considered to be his primary goal, which we already know. Did it incredibly well. You know, so like I said, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a positive spin on that. The fact that he considers his value to be greater than everyone else's in existence, I mean, that's pretty bad. And the fact that because he doesn't value it means that it, you know, is disposable is pretty bad. And the fact that instead of talking about this in philosophical terms, we're talking about the actual lives of everyone involved, that's the worst. But, you know, hey, can't, you know, make an omelet without breaking a few eggs or planets or galaxies or, well.
Now, one of the things that is key to the stories is the notion that he is betrayed by his subconscious thoughts. And there were a number of occasions in which he had power and somehow provided the means for himself to be defeated. And this is actually discussed in Infinity Gauntlet and then later in Infinity War, I believe, that subconsciously Thanos craves the power, but does not believe that he is worthy of it, and ultimately creates a scenario and self-sabotages because he knows he shouldn't have this and he knows that what he's doing is wrong. So even if he really, really wants it, there's still a part of him that doesn't. And because he doesn't believe it with his whole heart, that he somehow in some small way creates a scenario where he can be defeated, like with Nebula taking the Infinity Gauntlet from him because he ascends to the higher plane of existence and leaves his corporeal form defenseless with the gauntlet that provides Nebula the opportunity to just snatch it right off of his hand. That is discussed at length. Now, what would you say about someone who constantly sabotages and prevents themselves from accomplishing their goals?
All right. Once again, I'm going to use the premise that Thanos actually has done a lot with what he's been given. We have evidence of that. There's something called imposter syndrome. And no, it's not doppelganger or anything like that. It's a situation, and I think a lot of our listeners are going to relate to this. You know, let's say it's as simple as you've been doing your job and you've been doing it incredibly well. Your boss recognizes it and they start talking to you about things about, you know, well, we want you to have a different position. We want to give you a promotion. It's like, oh, that's wonderful, right? So from that standpoint, you start thinking, well, wait a minute. I've never done that job before. Oh my goodness. What am I going to do to meet the expectations of this new job? What if people find out that I don't have the skills that are necessary? Oh my goodness. That means that I have to make sure I act in a way that's going to be viewed as appropriate for my new position. And at some point, I'm worried that people are going to talk to me and realize that I'm a fraud, that I am not worthy of anything that's happening to me, and I'm going to be exposed. This is a 100% irrational thought. No one is quote unquote born to do something. I apologize. I know I'm probably going to get some feedback about that. You have natural talents and abilities that may predispose you to do some things better than others, but that doesn't mean that you 100% lack the capacity to do those certain tasks or obligations, especially when it comes to being productive in life. Thanos obviously got a lot of initial events in his life that indicated that he wasn't wanted. So maybe that plays into it. The idea that, you know, you don't belong, that created the isolation. And maybe that has something to do with it, in part to say, well, no matter what you do, you're still an outcast. Even the feedback from, you know, Death's representative, like, hey, man, doesn't matter what you do. Unfortunately, he's getting someone else telling him that, oh, well, you're successful, but you're not the right kind of successful. And you're
just not what we're looking for.
Yeah. Which, ironically, usually when you talk about imposter syndrome, it's the fact that, you know, people usually accept what you are and who you are. And that's why they wanted you to be in that position in the first place. We usually treat it as something that has to be overcome so that you can continue doing the good job that you're doing.
Yeah, it's fake it till you make it.
Right. Thanos, on the other hand, it's more like, you know, you already made it. Now we have to convince you that you faked it. You know, it's completely turned on its head with him. It's something that I hate to say. He doesn't have to be tricked. It's not as primal as that, but he has to be convinced that there's something else out there for him that just doesn't lead to as much destruction. Most people fail at doing that, but once in a while, we see some glimpses where, as long as he thinks the other person doing the job is going to be worse, then he starts getting his confidence back in what he's doing. Otherwise, once he gets to the top, kind of just starts, throwing himself off that mountaintop.
There's the one part in Infinity Gauntlet where he's so incredibly overmatched, or he's overpowering the rest of the heroes, that Mephisto convinces him, oh, you have to dial it back. You have to give them a sporting chance. Otherwise, that's not going to be impressive to Lady Death. So then he dials it back. I think he gives them a 0.05% chance of victory, but that's just enough for the heroes to come up with something. And of course, this goes to Mephisto being the sycophant and the Starscream, if you will, if I'm going to borrow TV tropes lingo. He's the Starscream. He's the second in command who doesn't really want the leader to be the leader. He wants to be the leader, but he's just going to kiss just enough behind to stay in the good graces. So there's a lot going on with Thanos there. In universe treatment, if such a thing is even possible, how would you treat Thanos in universe?
Okay, let me just admit my limitations. I'm not going to outsmart this man. I'm not going to overpower this man. I clearly don't have the resources that he has. So I'm going to have to call in some backup, and I'm going to have to use my knowledge of a person that I think will be really helpful in this situation, and that's Scott Adams.
The Dilbert guy?
Yes, the Dilbert guy, but it has nothing to do with Dilbert, okay? And everyone listening, please stay with me here, because I'm going to have to give a little bit of an explanation, okay? Scott Adams wrote a book. It's called God's Debris. The whole premise of this book was that there was let's say a human being, an entity that gets a package delivered, and he talks to the delivery man, and the delivery man realizes that the person that he's talking to basically knows everything and can answer any question that he poses. So the delivery man gets to the point where he starts asking these really deep philosophical questions, including the whole meaning of existence. And that person responds by pointing out, well, what would happen if something had complete omnipotent power, absolute control over everything? That's actually pretty boring. You can do whatever you want, whenever you want, but it doesn't matter because it's all going to be under your control anyway. So then how do you create a situation where you basically liven up the party? Because there is no party, it's just you. You're going to have to give up some of that control, but you don't have anyone to give the control over to because it's just you. Huh. Okay, so you're going to have to figure a way to give that away with nothing. Sounds like the ultimate impossibility. But basically, what if this whole universe, including the Big Bang and all that stuff, what if it was all because, well, there's no other way to say it. What if God got bored? What if God basically just said, okay, you know what? Let's see if we can figure this out. And now we're all God's debris. And our goal, ultimately, is to figure out how on earth do we all come back as one, and how we come back to being that thing that was there in the first place. If it's even possible. Maybe it's not, but the point is, it's a lot better than just being. You know? I'm sorry if this sounds like it's some weird trip. That's not my point. My point is, Thanos has absolute control over everything at different points, and it's not really amounting to much. How do we keep ending up in the same spot? How do we keep ending up with what amounts to, you know, the universe getting rebooted? And I don't mean that in the comic sense. You know, the reason that keeps happening is because, well, as much as he is courting Lady Death and we know it's not working and he has his tantrums and all that stuff, it's like, well, let's do something different. Let's have some fun. So I would challenge Thanos and I would say, you know what? You have all of this power. Show me what you can do if you could take a different perspective. Let's see what happens if you can actually do things a different way, because I don't think you can. Now, why would I be so brazen? Because I would be that brazen. Because I'm in the presence of a God. I'm going to die. Like, I mean, whatever happens. I don't have control over that. But if I take the opportunity, I'm going to take it the right way. I'm not just going to cower in fear. I think it was Ralph Waldo Emerson who said that God's work will not be manifest by cowards. If I'm in the face of God, there's no point in me pulling my punches, even if I can't outbox him.
So you're daring God to do better.
You got it.
Huh. It's a interesting philosophical concept. To your point about the story of God's debris, it reminded me of, there's a short story called The Egg, where a man dies and he meets this being who he perceives as God and starts talking to this being. Again, we'll call it God. And God says, you're going to be reincarnated, but now you're going to be reincarnated, about 1,000 years back, and you're going to be this I believe it was a Japanese woman. And he said, oh, okay. So time is not really linear then. And says, no, you are, every time you die, you get resurrected as another person in another point in time. To which the man says, so everyone is me. And God says, yes, you are every person who is and ever will be born. And once you really come to terms with that and you understand it, then you can join the rest of us, angels, gods, whatever, in this, sort of pantheon of godhood. And the notion that everything that you do to every other person, you do to yourself. Every time you were good to another person, you were good to yourself. Every time you hurt another person, you were hurting yourself. It's a really heady concept, but I think it goes to that sort of, similar to that God's debris notion where we are all interconnected and we are all part of the same one. It's a very heady philosophical and religious concept, but that's sort of what you're daring Thanos to do, is be more mindful of the impact that you have on everybody else and see if you can do better.
Yeah, I mean, we're dealing with eternal beings here. I'm pretty sure throwing Prozac at them isn't really going to do the job.
Well, now, speaking of the medication, I don't even know how you would begin out of universe, because clearly there is no person who has these powers. But you can address someone who has this petulance, nihilistic outset, the imposter syndrome, this ego. This is a very, very disturbed individual. And I'm really trying to just be polite about it. This person, minus the actual abilities, has a great number of issues. I don't even know where you would begin treating someone like this in a real world scenario. Please, to the extent that you can, enlighten me.
Okay. I'm going to admit that what I'm about to discuss is not exactly my my cup of tea, my area of true expertise. But what I'm going to put a few guardrails here in terms of what I'm saying. First of all, if the person is like delusional with power, okay, we'll address that the way we do with most mood disorders with medication, okay, or like antipsychotics if it's truly delusional. However, let's assume that that's been stabilized. Let's also assume that at this point we're talking about someone who has a steady job, who's productive in society. They've gone through the basics of, let's say, cognitive behavioral therapy or dialectical behavioral therapy, dealing with relationships, all of those things, but they're still not feeling connected. That's where I bring in what I'm about to talk about, which is existential psychotherapy. I know that there may be some mental health professionals, when they hear that, they're like, what on earth are you talking about? Believe it or not, this is something that exists. It's been discussed philosophically for centuries, but as a treatment, I mean, since I would say the 1980s, it's something that's been developed where you start to connect with the person because they have a lack of meaning to life. They don't see the purpose, become incredibly nihilistic. You help them realize that their connection has to be on a greater plane. They may not be spiritual or religious, but the idea is they have to find something that is important to them, not just from a person-to-person standpoint, but a quote-unquote greater good standpoint. And you do get into these discussions of what is the design of the universe? What's my role in the universe? And you help them navigate those types of questions, because unless they have a decent rubric, meaning a framework of how to start answering those questions, then they'll always feel unfulfilled. And usually it all comes down to the same point, which you actually mentioned much earlier with Thanos, which is they're trying to grasp the idea that they're alone, that their experiences of the world at large, yes, it's all based on their senses. I mean, for example, right now I'm in this room with you. I can see you. I can hear you. You know, I've known you for a long time. I have a representation of you in my mind, and I get to interact with that, but I'm not you, at least not the way things are currently constructed. The idea that no matter what I do, I'm myself. This all sounds very strange if you have to compartmentalize like this, but some people need that. If they don't do that, then they feel like the world is just incredibly strange and meaningless. It's something that a lot of people won't admit either to themselves or to the people around them, because and I don't like using these colloquialisms, but they're like, oh my God, that's crazy. But if you don't address it, you're not going to get the fulfillment that you want out of life. You could be as successful as any other person. You can have, all the money in the world. You could be a great athlete, all that stuff. But if that's truly what is causing the disturbance, you're going to be just as miserable as a person that's completely homeless and divorced and lost all their family years ago. That's one of those situations where you have to take a chance. It's not something that a person is going to usually freely admit. But if you're able to identify that as something the person needs to address, then it can do quite a bit of good.
Huh. Well, I, for one, am glad that you are not me, and I am not you. I'm glad to know you and have this representation of you, but I don't know that I could handle being you and me. Now, is this a situation? No, because I know I'm sort of joking here, but I'm just trying to, again, conceptualize this. Is this a situation where you're trying to get them to understand the connection between people, or?
Yeah. In other words, a lot of times the person's goals may not be directly tied to what you or I would consider as important. For example, let's say, all right, I'm feeling depressed. Okay, well, what are you depressed about? Well, I had a bad day. Okay, well, what was a bad day? Well, deal didn't go down the way I wanted to because I own my own business. Okay, that happens. Yes. All right. What went wrong with the deal? Oh, well, I don't know. I think they only accepted half of the partnership. So basically we have a stake in the company instead of having full control. Oh, okay. And it's well, that doesn't sound bad at all. What's wrong with that? And the person will say well, don't you understand? Actually, no, I don't. Other than you didn't quite get what you wanted, which gets back to that idea of someone kind of being childlike. You know what I mean? I already told you, I didn't get what I wanted. Isn't that enough? Well, not necessarily. It's usually because the person wanted to do something with that company. It's because the person said, well, no, I had a different direction I was going to go with them. I thought that I could create a whole new, way of creating their product that was going to help millions of more people than what they were doing. I had a grander vision. And it's oh, so in other words, the vision that you had for part of humanity at large isn't going to be met because of this situation. How on earth am I supposed to relate to that? I wouldn't say that part to the person. But the idea that, okay, you clearly have a large vision of what you want the world to look like, but you're not willing to put in the effort to say, meet people eye to eye, one-on-one about what that means to you. You have it all arranged and figured out on a macro scale. Let's get it back down to the micro scale. What are you doing one-on-one? What are you doing individually? Can you connect again? A lot of times people get, almost too philosophical. But the point is that if the therapy has to be philosophical to get back to the basic, that's pretty much what we're talking about. You have to meet the person where they are. And they may not even realize that's where they have to go. And I'll admit, like I said, this isn't always something that I'm able to do. And it's something that I'd have to learn more about if I really had to apply this on a regular basis. Since I'm dealing with acute care, I'm usually dealing with people that are much more either acutely suicidal or having direct, the basic problems that everybody else talks about in terms of, be it, divorce, lost job, drug problems, all that stuff. That's my bread and butter. These other things, I'll admit, I would have to refer the person to someone that really could handle that type of conversation on a much more regular basis.
Wow. I guess this is another situation where I'm finding some corollaries to my experience, because I find on a couple of occasions that I have difficulty explaining my vision for how I want the world to be. Or I have these ideas of things that I want and goals that I want to achieve. But when it comes to trying to elucidate those ideas, I falter sometimes because I have the ideas, but no idea how to execute them. And it's difficult for me sometimes to try to explain the specificity of why things aren't going the way I would like them to. So this is Again, I learn a lot every week about myself, and this is, dare I say, almost therapeutic for me in a sense to listen to some of these notions, as I hope it is for the listeners, because, again, we may be talking about comic books, but as I was explaining to somebody recently when I was telling them about the concept of the show, the comic books are really just an excuse for or the jumping off point for us to discuss these very relatable issues. So even if you're not necessarily a fan of the comic books and you don't always necessarily know who all these characters are, hopefully in some fashion you can relate to some of the struggles that they have in ways that, Doc, your therapeutic suggestions and your ideas can be incorporated into their daily life. At least over the last, this is the 8th episode we've done. So over these last 2 months, I've certainly learned things about myself through these discussions that I've been attempting to apply on at least some level. And when you were discussing this, it just, like I said, it resonated with me on some base level.
Well, if you end up getting the Infinity Gauntlet, I am sure that you will do better than Thanos.
I certainly hope so. I don't know that that's ever going to come to fruition, but, I would say that I have better intentions than Thanos, but we also know that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So I'm not entirely certain that having the omniscience and the omnipresence and the godlike ability to make the world into a better place would ultimately result in it, in fact, becoming a better place. But since I'm never going to get, a giant gold glove with 6 gems on it that will actually let me do whatever it is I want at the snap of a finger.
I don't know. There's a lot of decent bling out in the world right now, man. You could probably.
And there's some really solid replicas I have seen, especially with the merchandising for the film taken off. There are some really, really kick-ass replicas that can be bought for quite a pretty penny. But I just got my tax refund, and that's not, I think, a good use of my money. Maybe if I were single, but I don't think my wife would appreciate coming home and say, "Hey, honey, guess what? I bought this giant 2-foot size, life-size Infinity Gauntlet." What do you mean it can't go in the living room? We could just put it next to the television. Sure, the cats won't use it as a scratching post.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And by the way, we are not denigrating anyone that actually has replicas of the Infinity Gauntlet.
No, I'm jealous as hell. If you have a replica Infinity Gauntlet, send us an email. Like, can we come to your house? Hey. Like at least see it? Is it like a super large size replica, or is it like the type that you can actually like put your hand in and like maneuver? Because Thanos is like 8-9 feet tall. So he's a really, really big dude. So, and I've got big hands for someone my size, but that's a little too large, I think, even for me.
Well, you know what they say about people with large Infinity Gauntlets?
What? What do they say about people with large Infinity Gauntlets?
That they probably should try and dismantle it so that the universe doesn't get destroyed.
I was going to say I thought it meant that they had a lot of disposable income, but yours works too. So now the treatment is done. So now we get to the fun part. What happens when Thanos ends up on Dr. Issues' couch?
What the hell?
Where are we?
Hello?
Greetings.
Damn, Anthony. I know you're good with production, but this is insane.
This is not me.
What?
I didn't do this.
Enough.
Who said that?
The one who summoned you here.
Who are you?
I am Thanos of Titan.
Why would you take the time to summon us?
Previously, you were a nuisance, unworthy of any consideration or thought. But recently, you two have grown in power and influence, and you pose a threat to my plans, so you must be dealt with accordingly.
We're just podcast hosts. Like, we're not a threat to anyone.
Your failure to comprehend a greater scope of influence does not diminish your impact on my schemes. Even a fly can prove worrisome in the proper context.
So if we're flies, why not just kill us?
Omnipotence such as mine does not come by mindless killing. The best hunters study their prey extensively.
Oh, okay, Doc, I know you deal with these guys every week, but I am feeling very out of my element here.
Well, we should feel out of our element since when can we deal with God? I mean, you're a god, right?
Dude, what are you doing? Yeah, he is a god.
So, clearly he's figured out no matter what level we reach, we can never match his power.
I have no need of your sycophancy. I have already foreseen the result, and it is not one you would find favorable.
Okay, so if you can see how this goes, then you can tell us. How does it end? Like, what's the point of all this?
I bore of this repetition. You cannot conceive of the grandiose nature of existence and all that I have planned for it.
Then are you so omnipotent that you would be able to explain it to us insects? Because if you can't, then I question the validity of everything you said.
Yeah, like if you really know your stuff, then you should be able to explain it to us like we're 5 years old.
I have neither the patience nor the inclination to grant your request.
Look, you have all the power in the world, including that of time and reality. The fact that you won't means you can't.
Guard your words, mortal, lest they be your last.
On the contrary, I open myself to you, mighty Titan, not as a sycophant, but as a student.
Your lifespan is insufficient to allow you to learn even one iota of the knowledge I have gleaned, even with all your intelligence and study.
I don't know, Thanos. I mean, we're pretty smart guys. And if we're not enough, then how many is it going to take? And if you're that sure of yourself, then you should be able to give us immortality to learn, right?
Do not question how I use my powers. They are mine and mine alone to use as I see fit.
Well, it seems like you've already decided how this is going to go. You know how this ends. So that makes you a slave to your own fate.
Thanos is no slave.
Well, then I guess you're going to have to do something unexpected, because you're playing this like a rail shooter.
Yeah, we can't do anything about it if Thanos read the script.
You question my control over my power? I have the Infinity Gems. Reality is mine to shape. Time is my plaything. Even your very souls are subject to my whims. Your insolence in the face of such awesome power would be concerning if you had any ability to stop me. But instead, it is merely humorous.
Wow, I've never had God laugh at me before, especially before sending us to meet death.
Well, then I guess we'll just have a chat with her when we get there. We'll tell her you said hello.
You are unworthy to speak to her.
Hey, you threatened to kill us, and you've foreseen it, so just send us on our way down.
No! If I cannot have her loving embrace, then you shall not deign to be in her presence either. You wanted an exhibition of my power? Then you will have it.
So what does that mean? Whoa.
Wow.
Does Does this mean we're immortal?
Dude, does this mean we beat God?
I don't know, and I'm not entirely sure I want to test that theory.
Fine, I will. At least we got $1 billion in our bank account, right? And may have, super powerful control over all the Earth, right?
I don't know. I mean, I kind of feel a little taller.
No, not a chance.
Damn. I mean, well, at least we still have the podcast and all of our wonderful listeners.
Yeah, some consolation prize.
Hey.
I'm kidding. We love you all.
All right. I guess we just go home then. I think he left us a helicopter somewhere around here. So that's what that's like, huh?
Yep. We went there and back.
Wow. Okay. I have a little better appreciation for what you go through every week now, and I'm sorry. And I hope it isn't ever that bad again in the future, because I don't ever want to have to deal with that if I can avoid it.
Another day, another dollar.
Okay. It's a very pithy way to look at it, I suppose. But
hey, man, sometimes you just gotta brush off, the entire universe. It is what it is.
All right. That's works for you. Well, hopefully we'll still be here come next week, and he doesn't decide that he wants to come back and finish us as we continue to grow in power and might and influence. Next week, we're going to follow up Thanos. We're going to go from one Avengers villain to another. I guess we'll follow up on the notion of the Avengers villains, and we're going to do Loki. So this is kind of like a follow up to the Thanos one. We figure we'll continue to tie in with the Avengers villains. But also this is by request from a listener, Georgia, wrote us a very wonderful email. And so I kind of had an idea to do Loki at some point anyway. But since we got the request, we listen to our fans. So if the fans want Loki, then Loki they shall get. And just hopefully I don't get sucked into the plans and schemes of Loki sitting on your couch.
Or will you? No.
I hope not.
No, you won't. No.
I hope not. So that's going to about do it for this episode. As always, you can catch us on capesonthecouch.live. We are distributed through the Libsyn Network, Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, and YouTube. We have a Twitter account, Capes on the Couch. We have a Facebook page. Our email address is capesonthecouch@gmail.com. If you want to be like Georgia and send us a request for a character that you want us to do and you think would make for a fun episode, again, capesonthecouch@gmail.com. Please, by all means, send us your fan mail. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe on whatever method you use to listen to the podcast. We just listed all of the various distribution methods, and please leave us a good rating and review. So, Doc, anything you want to add before we close out?
Well, I'd like to officially say that I do have a Twitter account. It's at Doc Issues. That's DOCISSUES. I've had some very interesting followers so far that range from my professional background in terms of, actually, I just saw the Recovery Institute at Mass General, which actually is a pretty big deal, as well as, some of the other comic names. So, feel free to interact that way as well. And I look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah. And then next week when we talk Loki, we can discuss Avengers Infinity War. Coming out this week, and I'm so stoked for it. I cannot wait. It's going to be fantastic.
Oh man, this is what we dreamed of.
It really is. This is even more than we dreamed of. So, for Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.